Bang! Bolt Action News Group. How are you, everybody? What's up? Rice Crispy here for a Tuesday night bang. It was going to be 2 for Tuesday. Sorry, surprise guest couldn't make it. It was, what's up, Rogue Nation? Here we go. There we go. It was supposed to be San Joaquin telling us the story of Cop City in Atlanta and how they arrested 61 people for protesting that, and they got charged with the RICO Act. But he's going to make a video out of it, and we still have our main guest, who is D.B. McCrae, former law enforcement. He was a game warden, and now he's an author. And two of my favorite books are his Rise of the Oathbreakers, Part 1 and 2. And that's the prize that you win today in our trivia that we're going to have. It's just 3 questions. Whoever answers them first gets the books plus some bookmarks and some stickers along with it. D.B. McCrae. Did I say D.B. Cooper? My bad. Not D.B. Cooper. D.B. McCrae. Wow. Hey, Lenny. What's up, Rogue Nation? Yin Yang News. Welcome, everybody who's watching this now and in the future. Brooklyn Miss, Cliff Williams, Lou. Four corner fist in the air. So yeah, I'm gonna bring up the guest. Like I said, his name is D.B. McCrae, and he is a retired game warden and author. And I'll bring him up here now. Hello, sir. There we go. How are you, man?
Hey, I'm good.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, Finn, I just want to start off say thank you, man. This is really good. I appreciate it. Get the word out.
Yes, sir. You bet. I really appreciate everything that you've done. It's not easy for someone who is former law enforcement to speak out about things. So we're going to get your take on things. And I just want to say again, hi to everybody in the chat watching. Bama Cam, thank you for being here, brother. So, Mr. McCrae, I just have some questions for you. I just want to know if you could just give us a little bit of your background. And, you have a game warden is what you did. And what led you to become interested in issues related to policing in America? What like you retired, you're still passionate about it, right?
Yeah, in fact, I'm even more passionate about it. Yeah, well, anyway, I grew up hunting and fishing, so it was kind of a good fit to go into the career like being a game warden. It was in South Dakota, and in South Dakota, the official title is conservation officer. And there's a reason for that, because you have to have a 4-year college degree, and you have all sorts of management responsibilities in addition to the law enforcement part of it. But I retired in 2006 after, well, it was actually 25 years of accumulated experience. But 2006, and here, okay, on Thanksgiving Day, 2018, I was sitting next to a cousin at the table, and this cousin and I have a super good relationship, and I listened to what she says. And we were talking, and I can't remember the nexus that led to this, that led to this. She spoke one sentence, and what she said was, with everything going on in law enforcement today, and I got to be honest, I was still completely naive, and I didn't operate like we see a lot of police do now, and with very few exceptions, even with officers from other agencies, they didn't act this way. They were professional, they cared, and it was a really good team, no matter if it was troopers, sheriffs, not so much the feds, and fellow wardens. We didn't do this kind of stuff that you see. Well, anyway, Terry made that comment, that one sentence. And what happened was I didn't say anything to her at the time, but I bristled because I still had this naive thinking that, well, not that there were just a few bad apples, but I didn't realize the extent of how almost evil an aspect of law enforcement had become. So after she said that, I bristled, didn't say anything, but then I said, I listened to what she says because she's smart. So I came home later that day, and I tuned into YouTube because I knew that I'd be able to find the information on YouTube. And by golly, who did I find? The first one was San Joaquin Valley Transparency, my friend David. And what happened as I continued to watch these videos, guys, what you auditors do, these are your books, guys and gals. These are your books. If it hadn't been for what you believed in and what you were doing, I wouldn't have had the resources to do my research. But as each day went by and I'm watching these videos, it got to the point where I was yelling at this TV. And it would always be like, what are you doing? You can't do that. And I would be yelling what the correct thing they should have been doing. And I started getting so pissed. And the way I put it was, as I was building up this emotion, this anger, and in some cases, I just say it, so there was hatred. And I realized that I have to do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I funneled that anger and that bewilderment into this book. The way I also put it was that bad cops pissed off the wrong retired game warden. Because I went 23 years as an officer with one formal complaint, which was completely unfounded. The guy just didn't like law enforcement. He was a private investigator. So essentially, I went through my career with no complaints. And there were years that I would lead my entire agency in arrests and tickets. But I also led the agency in warnings. I issued about 3-to-1 ratio, 3 warnings, verbal or written, to every arrest and ticket. And Finn, I didn't believe for 1 minute that I was compromising my law enforcement efforts, not even a little. So I'm gaining this information, and I'm studying these videos, and I'm learning from the auditors and I'm seeing what the police are doing wrong. So I start this. And if it's okay that I mention the investment I put into this book.
Yes, please.
What you're looking at here, it's a work of love, but there were times it was a work of hate. It's the quintessential love-hate relationship. I'm a good writer. I do just fine, but there's times you hate it, but I'll tell you what, when it's done, you'll love it. But it took me from start to finish 2 years to write this book to where I needed it to be. 2 years. And 8,000 hours in those 2 years. That's the equivalent of 4 years, like 8-to-5 job. So 8,000 hours, 2 years, which averaged 18 hours a day. There were any number of nights, mornings, whatever, but I wouldn't even go to bed. I wouldn't try to sleep. I couldn't see anything. I had Vaseline eyes, but I'm looking at the screen and I just kept going. I didn't want to lose that continuity. And, what you see in this book, and what I'm talking about is just the effort, the passion. It's not me, it's you guys. I didn't write this for me. That doesn't do any good. But it's a matter of when you have that level of passion that and you feel you have to do something. This is my contribution. But again, don't make the mistake of thinking that, you, Finn, and so many other auditors, First Amendment auditors, the way that your work and all that crap that you go through, people were listening, okay? They were paying attention, including me. So when I finally got this done, when I got it to the point where I wanted it to be, I went ahead and had it published. I self-published. And I like it. I like where it is and where I got it.
Excuse me. Thank you, Cliff Williams. He just bought your book. And
thank you.
$10. Thank you. I'll put it to good use, brother. We appreciate you. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I gotta say, isn't it easier to do your job the right way, the way you did it, than to cover up all your wrongdoings and look over your shoulder and sleep with a heavy head? It's wake up. If you're in law enforcement and you're watching this, stop being a dirty cop. And I'm not saying you're on the take or anything like that. Stop falsifying police reports. Stop lying. Stop ruining people's lives on a whim just because they gave you an attitude and you feel authoritative and you want to ruin their life just because you feel above them. But go on. I'm sorry, sir.
No, that's fine. There's a difference between screwing up and screwing somebody over. I screwed up, but one of the reasons that I only really had the one unfounded complaint, formal complaint, is now I wasn't always true to this, but I tried to adhere to the principle that if I'm going to hold other people accountable, that results in a loss of money, a loss of freedom. There's an embarrassment factor, especially in the small towns. Like other than when I went to Sioux Falls, South Dakota in '90, I was there for 7, maybe 8 years. But these small South Dakota towns, somebody gets picked up by the game warden. I mean, that person's going to be ribbed mercilessly. And so there's a there's a psychological factor that goes into when you.
You're right.
When
it's a psychotic factor.
Right. There is an effect on the person that you've contacted in a law enforcement situation. And how do you get that done without them going away from the experience angry? And I'm not talking about because they got caught. That's different. But once you're dealing with them and you have a violation, you're doing an investigation, let me ask you this. What do you think works better? Being a jerk, like we see, or being someone who listens and cares and did everything they could to maintain a sense of humanity? Now, I want your viewers to understand, and being a game warden is not an easy job. I work by myself in areas where I was never going to get backup. And plus, I couldn't even hardly get across the dispatch where I was. I mean, it was, especially at night, you'd give directions like, I think I'm 4 miles northwest of Baltic on a north-south gravel road. So being an asshole would not have played well in the settings that I had to work. And
I,
where I'm going with this is,
about
what's that?
I was going to ask about the difference between working in an urban area versus a rural area, and in your unique profession was people are armed, like they're definitely armed out there when they're hunting,
Oh,
game.
yeah.
So go on, please,
Oh,
sir.
yeah. And I arrested people. It could be a felony warrant or I mean, it could have been back then. It was still a big deal to outlaw marijuana. And I look back at those arrests I made. Jeez, they're ingesting something from a plant. Give me a break.
Yeah,
But
but you're also,
I made those.
it's to be commended that in those situations where a lot of people are badge heavy and trigger happy, you kept your cool that whole time and you dealt with people the right way. And hey, that's to be commended. And can you give us an overview of the two books, Rise of the Oath Breakers 1 and 2? What inspired you to write them, and what key messages or themes do they explore?
Well, yeah, the inspiration came from my cousin at that 2018 Thanksgiving
Oh,
dinner table. And then I started doing my own independent research, and it was watching the videos and the work. Oh, probably over 90% of what went into this in terms of not just what I included as far as source material, whatever, was my motivation. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I couldn't believe what I mean. And another thing I want the viewers to know, that I arrested people in an area that no one was going to find me. And I'm talking multiple suspects, felonies, alcohol, drugs. There was one situation where I contacted a group of 5 anglers just north at the airport there, north of Sioux Falls, along the Big Sioux River. And they were all 5 members of, they were part of the Folk Nation. The Folk Nation. I think they come out of Chicago. So they were
yeah,
all
there's
affiliated with the Folk Nation. The other one that is often compared is the People Nation.
yeah, Latin
So what
Kings are in
happened was
People
one
Nation.
of them was fishing without a license.
I'm sorry, go ahead. I was just
I'm
clarifying.
sorry, what was that, Finn?
The Latin Kings are People Nation. If you've heard of the Latin Kings, and their rivals are the Folk Nation or King Killers. But go ahead.
Yeah, the Folk Nation go by the number 5, and people run him. I've made a lawful contact with it, and I find out that there's a felony warrant for him for both aggravated assault and numerous counts of contributing to the delinquency of minors, because the young girls in the area, they use folks like well, his name was Curtis. I could give you the full name, but I won't do that. But his name was Curtis, and he bought alcohol for them, a bunch of alcohol, and because he bought the alcohol, several almost died from alcohol poisoning. Now, I'm dealing with him again alone, and I've got this felony warrant. I go back up to him, and he's a big guy. As it turned out, I carried oversized handcuffs, and when I arrested him, I got 1 click, and still was able to do the pinky test, 1 click. So I have to go back. Now, they were on top of the floodgates. 1 push, and I was going to go over 10, 15 feet down to the rocks below. I'd have been dead. And so when I went back over, I explained to him that, that you're fishing on license, and, I just want to make sure everything's good here. And then he asked me a question, and I remembered the significance of it. Right before the 2 Idaho wardens were killed by Claude Dallas in January of '81, he asked them this question. What he asked him was, "Are you taking me in?" Which is another way of Are you going to arrest me? Well, that's exactly what Curtis said or asked. Are you taking me in? And I went, oh boy, listening, and you have to know how to respond. And yeah, some officers would go, what kind of stupid question is that? What do you mean by that's not how you handle it? I said, Curtis, as far as you mean being arrested? Yeah. I said, oh no. I didn't tell him about the felony warrant. I said, no, it's just going to be a piece of paper. And I said, it's on par with getting a ticket, like going a few miles an hour over the speed limit.
Yeah.
And that disarmed him. I got into my vehicle because I had already confirmed the existence of the warrant. I got him into the vehicle. And I actually, when I talked to him, it's one of those things that I know you have to be there. But I talked him into handcuffs while he was sitting in my truck. I just had him turn. This isn't personal, I have to do the job because the radio's telling me. And I got him handcuffed and whatever, and I didn't have any problem with him. And here's the deal. This goes right back to, do you want to be a jerk? Do you want to treat people like they're human beings? Just 3 months later, 2 Sioux Falls police officers were attempting to arrest Curtis for what reason? More outstanding warrants. And guess what he did?
He beat
him up and then he fled.
Wow.
He assaulted them and fled. Now you tell me, how did I get it done by myself with 5 gang members dealing with a felony and no backup?
It's kind of getting choppy. He fled, and what happened? Can you repeat that?
They were attempting to arrest him for the warrants, and no, you're not. He resisted, and there was a physical confrontation, and he was able to escape the officers, which is something that, I mean, if he had done that with me, with 4 other gang members, but he didn't. And so what's the difference? How did a lone game warden get him into custody for basically what would amount to similar warrants, where 2 Sioux Falls police officers with all the vast resources and immediate backup that they can draw from, he ended up basically resisting assaulting and a felony escape.
We have 2
good differences because
on this situation in the chat. If I may interrupt,
like Curtis have,
I'm sorry,
in the world, that you don't want to disrespect people. You don't disrespect people.
Exactly.
You only escalate when it's necessary, and when you take care of business, you de-escalate. So I was able to do that without, having to hurt him. Looks like you're frozen there. You with me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
How are we doing? Are we back online here?
Yeah, we're online. It's just a little choppy right now. I was just changing the highlighted comments and pointing out that there are 2 camps here, in this thought. Some people think that, like, you ought to just walk away and not do your job, I guess. I don't know what they're thinking. They said you lied. And then the Stone Sailor, who is my sometimes co-host on here, former law enforcement himself. The Stone Sailor, right? He was 30 years in the Navy, and then he spent 8 years as a correctional officer. And you used good verbal judo skills. That's what it was. And everybody's still walking around, right? That guy's still alive?
Everybody's still alive. I ran into situations as a matter of routine where especially larger metropolitan officers would have killed them.
Yeah.
Because they're all scared that this whole idea about going on the offense rather than, you're supposed to kind of be on the defense sometimes. And so it's the way that you treat people. And that's what it comes down to.
You know, we are in a police state at this point, and it's the reality. You know, now it's you're gambling with your life when you try to stand up for your rights, or if you just speak wrong to these people that are badge heavy. You know, badge heavy means somebody who wants to. Can you explain, please, sir, what badge heavy means?
The officers, yeah, badge heavy is you're drunk on power, and that you like to bully people, and you under threat of arrest, force, and violence, that you coerce them into doing things that are completely against the law, unconstitutional, and it, they the people go away from that. Of course, they've got just they're usually angry, and they, well, now it's one of those things. You know, what is that? Oh yeah, back the blue until it happens to you. But those badge heavy officers, there's not supposed to be a place for them. But unfortunately, they're just, you know, the profession is infested with them.
Yeah, we need police reform. There needs to be more community
Uh,
relations, and we need to change the
and
use of force.
you know, there's something that I
Sorry, it's chopping up
right
again.
in Rise of the Oathbreakers Part 2, guys. Okay, in Part 2, I cover in detail something you never hear about. All the things that you see, the really, I can say again, shitty things that police are doing to people is a matter of routine. The way that they piss people off, and it's not just one person. It's not just the people who are there. It extends to their workplace, their family, and now because of the internet and the job that folks like you do, Finn, it can go worldwide. Okay. But what happens at a community level, when you screw somebody over, a member of the community, you mistreat them, you use unreasonable or excessive force, uh, what do you think that does to those people in terms of whether they want to cooperate with the police? It destroys it. It blows it up. So here's what I have in Part 2, Rise of the Oathbreakers. And I'm condensing this to a few words. Rude, unprofessional, badge-heavy officers, they're making their communities less safe. Less
Mm-hmm.
safe. Because people don't want anything to do with them. They don't want to engage officers. If they're witnesses, they say, you, I'm not saying anything. Uh, Whereas if you had, it's called procedural justice. The concept of procedural justice is two things. The first is you treat people with respect. And the second part of procedural justice is you don't violate their constitutional rights while you're enforcing the law. And if officers would only try to, or make an effort to understand the concept of procedural justice, but they have no concept of it. It doesn't matter. They're making their communities less safe. And when you have a level of corruption that goes from, you know, let's just use Kay Fisher from Dothan, Alabama as an example.
Mr. Hairplugs,
What's that?
the hair plugs guy.
Finn, are you still there?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I
Sorry.
can't pick you up right now.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
I
can
was saying
now.
the hair plugs. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You showed that picture, you know, a few weeks ago in one of your content. Mm, that's Kay Fisher, but and they make their communities less safe, and that rot. I refer to it as a bad burrito that goes from that there's, you know, that it's going to infect and make sick the entire organization. So you have a truly bad cop, and he does truly bad things to people. but nothing happens, no consequences. You might even be encouraged to keep doing it. Well, you go from the field to the very top of that law enforcement agency, and then and I'm talking sheriff, chief of police, or whatever, and there you jump to a county commission, you go to a city commission, a mayor. When that system is completely corrupt, not one of them is understanding or cares about the concept of procedural justice. They reinforce that kind of bad policing all the way through, and by protecting these officers, they're having the opposite effect. The opposite effect. Heavy-handed policing and all the research that's done does nothing to reduce crime. So you can be heavy-handed, go harass people, roust them, stop them for whatever you can, and if you can't, just make something up. That's destroying. It only takes one officer. Now,
it's just that
when you see
when they make it up the ranks,
when it goes up the when it goes up the ranks, that just goes to show that the whole house of cards is rot.
Reading the list that Lieutenant Foster said, and his number one concern out of 10 is officer involved shootings, right? And number 10,
right,
human trafficking. So the body worn cameras are a problem number 2 to him, and 10th is human trafficking. So they're focused on themselves and their self-preservation. It's such a dangerous job. Like, that's the number one thing. We need more money for more equipment to get us heavier against the people who we are at war with. And you know what? Human trafficking, the biggest problem on the planet, not just our country, is 10th on that guy's list in your book. I just had to interject that part.
No, that's good. And see, this is when I get into the problem with most of the police training academies, field training, which is an absolute joke. Then you get into the in-service training. You want to know where most of the poison comes from in the training pipeline is the field training officers. They tend to have 10 to 15 years on. They're all burned out. They're grumpy. They hate everybody. They hate everything. And when that recruit comes, to be with that particular field training officer, the recruit officer, he probably already went through the academy. He wants to be a police officer, dealing with a field training officer who's just a cranky POS. Mm-hmm. That recruit officer, to keep his job and not want to make waves, guess what he does? He does what he's told. So now you go from the academy, which may or may not, hit or miss the mark, to the field training program, and now they're being told, forget what you learned in the academy, and that does happen all the time. It's not like, just something somebody says because they're upset. No, it's a fact. And if you want to survive out here on the streets, you're going to do it my way. And the one agency of all the law enforcement agencies that I really dislike more than any other is the LA County Sheriffs, and then that's followed by the LA County PD, or the LAPD. What the LA Sheriffs do as a matter of routine is really disturbing. Now you ask yourself, why do they keep doing it? Why is nobody doing anything about the blatant violation of people's constitutional rights? You don't get to pull people out of the vehicle who have done nothing wrong, turn around, pat or fully search them, put them in handcuffs, walk them back to a patrol vehicle, stick them in the back as you go through the entire vehicle without consent, often, or their coerced consent, no valid search warrant, and no probable cause of a crime of items criminally possessed inside the vehicle, which will kick in what's called a Carroll search. They just search everything. I even watched them, popping hoods. And under Carroll search, if you have
checking the oil,
well, yeah, maybe they ought to do that. You know what? If they were to check the oil, at least they'd be doing something that was contributing to society.
I caught a cop in Clearwater, Florida, and I'm not going to say his YouTube channel name because he hasn't posted in over a year. I think he got busted for doing that or something. but I got him on a natural cherries and berries I spotted on my way home cop watch, and he had a car pulled over, and he told me it was just a warning, just to let her know. I said, let her know who's boss, a warning not to step out of line. That her headlight was out when both of them were intact. They had her
Of
trunk open.
course.
They had all her doors open, searching her whole car for a headlight out warning that wasn't even out. And he has a channel where he uses his body cam to make fun of the homeless. And Corporal McCrea, he got promoted to corporal. He's in
There you
one
go.
of Jeff Gray's videos, one of the latest videos in Clearwater, where the guy comes out and says, as soon as you have a sign, it's not First Amendment anymore. That idiot, that moron, he's the guy I'm talking about.
It's not free speech when you go from verbal to putting it on a sign. That's an officer who may or may not be ignorant of the law, or it may be a case where he just doesn't care and he's making stuff up because they're arrest driven. They get rewarded for making arrests, and it doesn't matter if they fabricate the crime or they make stupid statements like that. We hear that all the time.
They incentivize ruining people's lives with bullshit.
That's what it is. You know, that's what it is. And when there's no repercussions, you know, one of the reasons that we have such a problem, in the hiring process, you know, in part 2, I make that in one of the sections, I say that on psychological exams, it's pretty obvious that these agencies are only hiring those candidates who flunked the test.
Yeah.
And in that particular case, I was referring to the Loveland, Colorado Police Department, what they did to Karen Garner.
Yeah.
And others, you know, it's crazy.
You know, Colorado, you would think it would be progressive, and they've been sued over and over again. We have an army of people working tirelessly there all the time, and they still don't get it. We still have Aurora. Chief Art Acevedo hopefully has made a positive change over there. That's the guy that was ousted out of Miami for calling out the Miami Mafia, and he was in Houston PD, and he left there for what they did to the Tuttles. You know, there was a detective that called the wrong house, and they killed a Vietnam veteran and his wife. Rest in peace to the Tuttles.
And the dog.
Yeah, and the dog too. Yeah. I remember all this. I don't forget this. Never forget. You know, that was just a few years ago. I'm gonna milk that for another 20 years, like, you know. They milk things.
You know, one of the best things is to expose these officers, and they may talk tough and say, "I don't care," you know, put it in YouTube, go ahead, but you know they jury, like a federal civil jury. I don't care. You know, they're just brain dead. So when they're arrest driven and they're rewarded by making arrests, well, that's only going to encourage the fabricating crimes and doing illegal searches, and then it just becomes, you know, it becomes the norm in the agency. And here's something else, an analogy. I like to live my life using analogies. It's just a quirk.
Yeah.
Okay, Finn, you know, the viewers, you want a new garage built, so you're going to interview some carpenters, right, and see what they have to say and the price, get the estimates. So yeah, here comes Joe Schmuck. Guy says he's a carpenter. He's got the shingle to prove it. He went through the Carpenter Academy. So you're standing there, and as kind of a joke, you say, haha, what's this? What are these? Oh, I don't know. Well, in one hand, you're holding a nail, and the other, a screw. What's this? I don't know. If a carpenter doesn't know the difference or know what a screw and a nail is, they have no business being a carpenter.
Perfect analogy.
And when cops, when all the stuff that we're doing, okay, guys, it's law enforcement 101, or at least in theory, they don't even know the foundational aspects because they're wasting so much time in academies
They know more about the loopholes in the laws than the laws.
Well, the system is stacked against us because you're just a private citizen against the whole government apparatus. It starts with the order followers who don't care. Oh, I get to arrest you, or if I have to, I'll make something up. And then it goes up the line all the way up to the corrupt prosecutors. And like in part 2, I refer to the judges as judges in name only. The whole system is government resources because that single penny came from you.
You know, yeah, that.
So you have the massive resources of the government.
All the way up the ladder, beyond the thought police, is the backer, the person who blindly backs the authoritarian that's going to take away your rights and will kill the thought police just to back that demagogue.
Let me
1984 reference, y'all.
Yeah, I've got references to that in my books too. I'd like to think that there's really not much I miss. And when you put that kind of work into it and you actually care and you want to make a difference, maybe there was kind of a niche that, you guys are out there and there's other civil rights activists and there's the civil rights attorneys, all doing this job with the same goal. But what I happen to have a talent for writing. And I thought, there's a huge gaping hole in that whole knowledge, department. And my niche was, I'm going to write books. I'm going to fill that niche. And Finn, I'm sure you will agree that there's nothing in the known universe like my Oathbreakers books. They have there's the chance of, for $15 or $30 to get both. You don't have to go to college. You don't have to have a degree. You can read the books, and remember what we talked about, what my slogan is? No more than the police, ... a lot more.
Right.
You'll be able to put them to shame. And knowledge, if the police aren't going to reform, we have to reform our minds with knowledge. Because this is the only thing that's going to be able to keep those cops at bay the majority of the time. Okay, that is my gift to the American people. They're going to learn more about their rights, the law, case law, reading my books, than they will ever outside of the United States Constitution. And that's the way I intended it. Would it be all right if I dropped a name?
Yeah, please do. And it's trivia time after that.
I just want to mention, when we talk about the kind of people we run into, and this is my case, I want your viewers to Google Robert Leroy Anderson. Do it now. Robert Leroy Anderson. I had 2 contacts with him fishing north of Baltic along the Big Sioux River and north of Sioux Falls. He was a budding serial killer.
Wow. Convicted of kidnapping, killing Larissa Domansky in Sioux Falls in 1994.
And then Piper Striley. Now, here's what I want to say about that. That morning, Piper and her husband and their 2 children, they lived out in the country west of Sioux Falls in a rural setting. And they ran a little, it was basically a Christian-themed daycare. Well, Robert Leroy Anderson, you remember that line from Silence of the Lambs, where Hannibal Lecter says, we covet what we see every day? We covet what we see. Well, Robert Leroy Anderson would fish one of the lakes west of Sioux Falls, Lake Vermilion. And they had a bait shop. Well, it was really close to where Piper and her family lived, so she would go to the bait shop instead of Sioux Falls to pick up things like milk, etc. Well, who would be in there? Robert Leroy Anderson. And he became fascinated and obsessed with Piper, pretty girl, pretty lady. So he was coveting her because he saw her. Read what he did with his Bronco and his torture chamber that he had built in the back of it. Now, I'm going to say this, and you got to forgive me if I get a little bit. That morning that he was kidnapping Piper Striley, he shot several shots with his 9mm pistol. As I came to learn later on, I was 2 miles away. And I didn't hear the shots because the wind was blowing from the northwest, not the southeast. If that wind had been southeast 2 miles away, guess what? Well, it's a little more than 2 miles, but so what? I would have heard the shots and investigated, and I'd have caught him. A game warden. And I didn't do anything wrong. It was a matter of circumstances, but that goes to show I almost caught him.
Man.
And that's why that's why you go into law enforcement. It's not to do the things that we see, all this petty chicken shit stuff that cops are doing because they want to run everybody for warrants.
That's what I'm saying. You can catch murderers and rapists and stuff, but instead, you didn't come to a complete stop at that stop sign on your bicycle and take your liberty for 2 days. That happened to our guy, Corey, government accountability, because he was recording them. They got him, and he took it to trial, and they found him guilty of resisting an officer for not giving his ID, which he didn't have an ID. He just didn't answer the cops in time. And the original stop was because he didn't come to a complete stop on his bike. That's what they're wasting their time on instead of fighting crime. And then they ask for more money in the budget for bigger military style equipment. So for what? To go raid a human trafficking compound? No. So you can bust a drug house. That it's the wrong house. It's a Vietnam veteran and his wife and their dog.
Yeah, that's why the subtitle of part 2 is America's Crisis of Competency in Law Enforcement.
Yeah.
And I focus on the incompetence that's just rife throughout the profession.
It's a hiring problem. Yeah.
Oh, hiring, lack supervision, crappy supervision, people who don't care. It's all about the thin blue line. And you know what they're doing with what they're doing is their legacy, bad cops' legacy, is going to be passing that bad policing to the next generation of officers, which means the next generation of citizens are going to be subjected to the same bullshit that a generation before them did. So their legacy is going to be passed on in tyranny. And tyranny doesn't diminish. Once it's unleashed, it's only going to go one direction. It's going to get worse and worse and worse. And in part, or the first oath breakers, but I'll just say this is from my heart. I studied World War II and the Civil War, but my dad was SK2 in the Navy, storekeeper second class in the U.S. Navy during World War II. I miss you, Dad. And if you read the story of Iwo Jima or Peleliu or Okinawa, because something about that Pacific theater with the Marines. For those who don't know, when they did the invasion of Iwo Jima, by the time the fighting was over, for the most part, 5 weeks later, 19,000 out of the original 70 or 80,000 who went ashore were either wounded or killed. And the total number who were killed in 5 weeks of battle on Iwo Jima was 7,000.
Yeah.
When you see cops do like Kay Fisher and all these other, the way that they treat people and the things that they get all bent out of shape over, and those 7,000 Marines didn't die so that they could do what they're doing to the people.
That's
And
exactly
that's something else. They have no concept of the sacrifice that our military has done under the guise or belief of freedom. And,
Mm-hmm.
in part two, when I go through what Keokuk, Iowa police did to the guy who was watching the Missouri River from a park bench, and I asked the question, if just one of those 7,000 Marines came back and they were made aware of what this one officer did to this one citizen who wasn't breaking the law, and asked that Marine, is this what you died for?
You wouldn't hear an
Because
answer.
guess what? With modern law enforcement, they die for chicken shit.
He would go and fix it himself.
Right. He would be in shock. He'd be aghast. It's like, what? And the way I conclude that is, you ask the Marine if that's what he died for, because and it is now. And then I conclude it with, you know what? You're going to ask somebody else that question. Was it worth the sacrifice? And I'm talking about that Marine's parents. How do you think they'd feel if they knew their son gave everything so a Kay Fisher could come along and do his bullshit? And
Right.
it's completely lost on these officers. And whether it's they're hiring sociopaths, and they are, or the training sucks, which it does, and you have lax or no supervision, which there is, this isn't going to stop. It's chicken shit law enforcement. But you know what? They're told to do it because you never know. That guy you say didn't put his blinker on within that 100 feet of the stoplight or stop sign or whatever, because he turned, which is now arbitrary. They get to decide what the distance is. Well, that you make that stop, that driver might be drunk, or he might be driving without a license, or might be felony warrants. He might be on the FBI 10 most wanted list. So everybody is guilty.
Mm-hmm.
Right out of the gate, guilty.
People.
That is not a sustainable situation. We can't live in a country like that. It's impossible. And American police they're some of the most violent. They kill more people. I know there's a lot of variables in that, but they still kill more people. And they have record numbers of lawsuits. In part two, I have a little deal about the amount paid out in lawsuits in over a 10-year period between Chicago, LA, I think it's Philly, and whatever, New York City. They paid out a record $3 billion just in awards and civil suits. Do you think it's slowing anything down when they're not being held accountable and it doesn't come out of their pocket? It's business as usual, and it's like a spoiled child. If you're not going to discipline that child, well, guess what? They run amok. And if you don't have that level of oversight, not only, oh boy, it's not only the lack of it or the encouragement of chicken shit stuff within an agency, but the U.S. Supreme Court keeps handing them win after win after win. And everything's about officer safety. You know what? I cared about officer safety, but it was still contextual. I still had to make contact. I had to treat people with dignity and respect to the best of my ability. And, they work offensively, but the Supreme Court says, yeah, you can order driver and passenger out. And they have to have that authority. Believe me, if you haven't been in law enforcement, You have to be able to control subject placement. You have to. But what they do is, okay, the Supreme Court reinforced it. Okay, you can pull everybody out of the vehicle, but what do the officers do? When the Supreme Court handed down Mims and Wilson decisions, it didn't say that, oh, once you get them out, you can go hands-on, you can search them and all the other stuff. No, it's subject placement. But when the Supreme Court gives them a little more clear-cut authority, it's creeping tyranny. Like I have in part 2, I call it creeping tyranny. The police will take what the courts give them and take it 1, 2, or even 3 steps beyond. And now, because the Supreme Court put that in motion, it's the runaway train, and they're getting away with more stuff, and it becomes more egregious in terms of violating your constitutional rights.
Yeah.
You know,
on that,
I know that there's a lot of stuff going on, but I want to just tell the folks one more officer safety flight professionalism story.
Shoot.
In one of my other books, under the Forgotten Lawmen series, I was alone checking anglers along the Big Sioux River again, right up there on the floodgates, right where I ran into Curtis. Well, long story short, there were 2 fellas who were fishing out license, and I know that's going to draw some comments. I would encourage people to go back 80, 90 years and why we have a license requirement. It's not to give up ID, because you don't even have to actually, here you go, and no, you just display it. But it goes back to the funding mechanism under Dingle Johnson and Wallet Moreau. They needed to have a dedicated source of funding. And what happened, anyway, there's a reason for that, the license requirement. It goes into the management of the resource that the person is consuming. It's a user group fee is what it is. If you don't hunt, fish, whatever, you don't pay for it. Well, anyway, the two I was dealing with turned out to be, what are they called? Prospects with the Vagos Motorcycle Club. And I dealt with that by myself. Only the one had the felony. He had felony, and he was an armed and dangerous. And once I got that information, he was unsecured in my truck, because that's where I was talking to him and issuing the citation. And I had to turn into a Hollywood actor once I got confirmation that this guy is not nice. And at one point, walking up behind us was a nice family, because they'd been fishing the Sioux River. And I had to tell him, you want to talk about the verbal aspect, the judo and stuff. Hey, this is Roy coming up behind me. He's a hunter safety instructor. Could you just be, just hang tight here, Doug, and I just want to go talk to him. Well, I went up to him. They were about 20 yards behind my rig. I stopped and I said, folks, I said, don't, just smile, nod your heads. Can you do that for me? The man in my truck is a wanted fugitive, armed and dangerous. Could you please take your family, sir, back to the Big Sioux River where you were fishing?
I had the same thing happen to me when I landed in Heathrow Airport in London. A detective was questioning a guy, and he was just as polite and said pretty much the same thing to me. It was funny but go on. It's just your demeanor and like how you like brought a really edgy situation down. That's sketchy. It could have gone south quick and easy, but go ahead.
When I didn't even call for backup, because I was going through what was the state radio dispatch. And the dispatcher was one of the best in the entire state of South Dakota. And he was giving the information in code. And that's how I knew that I was dealing with a very dangerous man. And I didn't have backup. And what happened was, their vehicle was parked out by the highway. So I said, well, yeah, once I knew they didn't have licenses and all this other stuff hadn't broken yet, they walked down the little gravel trail to where their vehicle was, and that's where I was going to write the citations. And when I had the first one in my truck, the other one kept trying to, those heavy iron gates, they swing and they kind of had angled metal and stuff. Well, that's what was blocking people from going from the highway on the dike that went to the river and floodgates. Well, the one who was not, wasn't in my truck, he kept trying to go over the fence or the gate. And I have to yell, "Sir, I need you to stay where you are. I won't cross from that gate." And then when when everything was said and done, when the state trooper finally got there, after I'd already made the custodial arrests and everything, we had to do an inventory search of their vehicle because they were in custody and we had to get it out of there. And why did he want to get into the vehicle? It might have had something to do with the short barrel pump shotgun that was pushed right up against, the front seat. Wow. And it was around in the chamber, and the safety was off. And I wonder why he wasn't trying to cross the gate because he needed a can of, mosquito repellent. But I didn't. How did I do that by myself? When I arrested Curtis, right toward the end, but he said, "You didn't piss me off." It was procedural justice. I didn't even know the term at the time. If there's any cops watching this, would you freaking get the wax out of your ears? I didn't take his pride, which is all he had left in life.
But don't take their dignity, don't take their humanity on top of their liberty.
That's, and that's largely the theme. Whether there was ever humanity in law enforcement is up for debate, but the focus of this through the whole thing, the theme that I've woven through the book is, until the police have some understanding of the concept of humanity, nothing's going to change. Nothing. Yeah. If they can't, and the question is simple, guys. Would you want your family members to be treated the way that they're treating the public? That's not acceptable.
All right. And for the bootlickers in your family, here's your chance to win a copy of this. Give this to them. It'll change their mind. Somebody said that earlier in the comments.
Change their life.
DB has a good way of exposing the truth in law enforcement and the corruption, how it's gone wrong now versus what it's supposed to be. So, all right.
Right.
I have some questions, and the first person to answer all three correctly gets these two books, Rise of the Oathbreakers and Rise of the Oathbreakers 2, along with some cool
bumper stickers.
And you got a bookmark in here too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. All right, question 1. And I'm going to read these quickly, so whoever answers them
They are signed, Finn, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And they're dated of October of this year. We were going to do this last month. We just got around to it now because of both of our schedules. Thank you for being here, brother. Thank you for everything you did. Thanks for these books and for the opportunity to give them to one of the patriots watching this so they can spread the knowledge too, man. I know. Shout out to Jack Attack Audits. Jack's in Tampa. and he gave these books, or well, I think he bought the second one also, but I know he got the first one and he gave it to his son as a summer reading project. And that's the best thing we could do, more than our own actions in our own life, is our progeny and our legacy, how we teach them and how we leave the world behind us through our kids. So all right, question number 1 is, which amendment to the United States Constitution granted women the right to vote? Question number 2 is, what is the minimum age requirement for a person to serve as a U.S. Senator as specified in the Constitution? And question number 3.
I like it.
The 8th Amendment of the Bill of Rights prohibits what? Just one out of all the things it prohibits is fine for time. All right, we got some answers, but I want all three in one. First person to answer correctly, I'll call you out. In the meantime, DB, what would you want people to take away from this book? What's the most important point that you want them to understand?
Learn their rights. And that's why the slogan, you'll know more than the police, that you're going to know more than the cops, and then a lot more.
You know why?
And that's not just.
Yeah, because you made a C average in high school. Go ahead, no more than the police. Be an A student.
Yeah, it's a civics lesson.
Yeah.
Yeah, be an A student.
No name coder.
So people are going to learn the rights, and now they're going to be more confident in when they're dealing with.
No name coder got it correct.
Yeah, cruel and unusual. There you go.
Yep. All right. So the 19th Amendment to the United States was ratified in 1920 and granted the women the right to vote, ending gender-based voting discrimination. And the minimum age requirement to serve as a U.S. Senator is 30, as specified by Article 1, Section 3 of the Constitution. And the 8th Amendment prohibits the imposition of excessive bail, fines, or cruel and unusual punishment. So congratulations to the no-name coder. I believe you already know my email, sir, rightscrispy@gmail.com. If you want to give me a P.O. box or your address, I will send all this stuff to you. Congrats. And thank you for all the great work you do. No Name Coder has put together a facial recognition database of the cops, not of the people. So now when they don't want to give us their name and badge number, instead of me having to go to every place and asking them for their name and badge number, we got it because No Name Coder has facial recognition. If you just recorded them, you got their name and badge number. So thank you, No Name Coder, and congratulations once again.
Oh, Finn, another comment when what they're going to get out of the book or the books.
Yes, sir.
They read the books, and the next time they see a cop do something, they're going to know what the cop is doing wrong. And that's a beautiful thing. Because when you go into the comment section, people are all over the map. We need to bring that together. We can't have people this, and most of it's wrong information that they're putting in the comment. Read the books, and we all coalesce. And you watch the videos, or you're going to know. You're going to say he can't do that. He can't do that.
So
or even
this is the time we up for questions, comments, agreements, or disagreements. This is how we hash things out. And we are lucky enough to have DB McCrae here to be that point of contact where we can bounce things off of him. And just like our rights, you don't always have to agree. You might find some of these questions offensive. Like somebody was saying, oh, you lied to that guy. Yeah, but everybody walked away alive, And sometimes I'm not condoning lying on my part. I mean, I've lied. People lie. Everybody lies, I guess my uncle never did. And the people would come to the door and say, "Hey, is your mom home?" He would say, "Yeah, she's home, but she doesn't want to talk to you." When she told him to say she's not home, he wouldn't lie. But he is one of the few people. I know everybody else does. So it's something that if you want to stay alive in a situation like that, I rather lie than shoot somebody dead or die myself. So,
And
or have
that's
them
what you
kill their
have to
family.
do. And there are times, and with those examples I've given you, that you have to instantly turn into a Academy Award winner Hollywood actor. You have to do it, and it works, and it's not a violation of constitutional rights. It doesn't even have to involve any lying. It's just knowing what to say.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's the takeaway from the know a lot more than the cops.
Yes, sir. All right. So, as far as questions, somebody else asked if you had an audiobook format, and I think Gravy just answered that. Thank you, DB, for creating an audiobook format. I just requested it from my local library. Any other questions, comments, agreements, disagreements?
I have an audio book out for the first Oath Breakers, and if they were to go to the website, my publisher is Book Baby, and if you were to go to Book Baby's website, set up an account, the audio book, it's not the only place, but that you can download the audio book from the Book Baby website. I wish I'd used my voice, but that just gets way more complicated and expensive.
Did they do
But
a?
yes, so I still have to do the audio book for part 2, but the part 1 is out.
Did they use a real person to read it, or did they use AI?
AI.
Oh, okay.
But you know what, Finn?
Have you heard it all the way through?
No, I
Oh,
did when I was reviewing it.
oh, okay, okay. Yeah, that's what I meant, because sometimes I've listened to some that were AI audiobooks, and it's not the author's fault. It's these people. They told them, "Oh, it worked great," and then chapter 3, they'll start pronouncing words like entire, entire, you know, and it just
Yeah,
like reads it wrong.
yeah, that's one of the things that you do is you go through the start to finish, again, start to finish, and you've got your notes set aside. And I wish I could remember some examples of when I was doing that cross-checking of the words that they were mispronouncing, and you get an opportunity to correct that. So I
Yeah.
think I took 95% of the uh, you know, the words that were butchered and got around that because I had that input is because it's my product.
Well, that's wonderful. See, that's I asked for a reason, and you gave the right answer. You fixed it, because some people might get their audiobook done through AI, and they don't do that quality control. So you made a good investment, Gravy, in buying that audiobook. You're going to hear it
That's
clearly.
cool. Huh.
Yeah.
You know, I've never seen the sales report on the audiobook. I don't know how many folks have downloaded that. He could be the first.
And I've been on an audiobook kick. I've listened to 5 books on D-Day alone. You said you like Civil War and World War II stuff. Well, if you've
Yeah.
ever read Band of Brothers or
Mm-hmm.
D-Day by Stephen Ambrose, D-Day is
What
really
was the
good.
second one?
D-Day.
Oh,
It's
yes, I did.
by Stephen
Oh, you
Ambrose.
bet.
And then
Yeah,
Beyond,
Stephen Ambrose. He passed away a while ago.
yeah, and Richard Winters wrote Beyond Band of Brothers. That was a really good book too.
Um, and here we go back to what those men did and the way that law enforcement is pissing on their graves.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not right.
And speaking of their graves, my wife and I went to Normandy in 2011, and
You did.
we went to that gravesite, and we started our tour at 10 a.m. and our respectful guide Alan with the D-Day tours, of the Band of Brothers tours in Normandy. He's an expat from England. He moved to Normandy, France. His kids are in French schools there. He lives in that little farming co-op town. And he didn't stop his respectful dialogue until 4:30 p.m. when we got to the cemetery and those 9,300 plus graves. You know that there's only 9,300 there, but there were a lot more people who were killed that day. And since their bodies didn't make it onto the beach, they were just washed away in the surf. All those other guys got recorded as dying on the 20-something of June instead of the 6th of June. And it was a lot more than 9,300 because, yeah.
Now, there's one other way to put that in perspective. If you hit the beaches on D-Day, and let's say you're trying to get up to the Vierville draw, and you make it off the beach fully intact, and you get up to the top of the draw, and you got to clear out the trenches and the pillboxes. By nightfall, which isn't true, I'm just using this as an example. By nightfall, you basically survived. You've done your job. The soldier just went through a horrific thing, but his war was only starting.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like he could go home. They had to go another how many months of brutal fighting.
Yeah.
And those who make it to the end, I mean, I don't think there's a whole lot left. And have you seen the video of I think he's like 100-year-old Marine vet, and he's just crying.
Mm-mm.
And he said that what's going on in the country, and I don't want to get.
It's chopping up. Hold on, guys.
Dying for.
There we go.
It wasn't worth fighting for. That's the legacy from government.
Richard Winters was the major of Easy Company, the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment of the 101st Airborne Division in the Army. They landed behind enemy lines on D-Day to prepare for the invasion that was happening the next morning. And that whole story was made famous by Stephen Ambrose in the books Band of Brothers, which they turned into a show, and then they made Saving Private Ryan based off of that. But it was all inspired by another book, and I don't know if you read this one, by David Kenyon Webster, who was in Easy Company. It was called Parachute Infantry. And
I haven't read it. I know of it.
Yeah, he was a Harvard student, and he just wanted to write what it was like to be a private. And man, when they raided Hitler's booze, he ended up taking all the gin because, Nixon had taken everything else. The Yale man beat the Harvard man to the booze. And he said he spent the rest of the summer on Zell am See drinking gin and iced tea. And that's been my drink of choice for since I read that book. And it's good. I recommend it to everybody. Drink responsibly.
Well, if we ever get together, you owe me that.
You got it, man. Some Bombay Sapphire, some good Southern iced tea. We got it. Well, thank you, brother. Thank you for being here. And No Name Coder is excited to read your books. Congratulations again. And thanks to everybody in the chat who's reading this now and everybody or who's watching this now and in the future. And any closing remarks, DB?
Read and learn. And then after learning, apply. Read, learn, and apply. We can end government tyranny tomorrow if we would just learn and act together.
Yeah, don't depend on them to teach you. They're not going to teach you how to overthrow them. So that's why you have to do your own independent research. Be an autodidact. Autodidact. You know who's an autodidact who taught themselves? Is that guy Richard Dreyfuss. And he's super smart, man.
Yep.
We're going to need a bigger boat. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
And thank you, DB. Take care, y'all.
Thank you, Finn.
Hang on, stay. We're gonna talk backstage. Thank you, Sam.
Okay.
Take care, y'all.